Today we celebrate the feast day of St. Teresa of Avila, and when you read a summary of her life, what you find out, she was quite the wild teenager. She loved doing everything that teenagers love to do. You know, she loved boys and parties, and she loved to rebel against her parents, and these were the things that she was doing. She had a very, very strict father, and so when she was in her mid-teens, her parents were like, we can't deal with her anymore, and so they sent her off to a convent, which was not an unusual thing. In that time, though, the convent in Carmel was not as strict as her home was. So she actually enjoyed being there because it was looser than it was with her parents. And so, but there came a time when she had to decide, would she be staying in the convent or would she be getting married? And ultimately, of course, she stayed in the convent, but only not because she felt she had a true calling, but because she knew that how sinful she was, and she said, I need to protect myself, and if I go out into the world, I'll just reject God completely. So in the midst of all this, she's in the convent, and she finds out, you know what, it's not that protective. There were social classes within the convent based not on holiness, but on how much money they had. Some of them had servants taking care of them. It was a convent well in need of reform. And she would very much entertain people who would come to the room, the visiting room, and she would talk to them about meditation and about prayer, not because she thought it was an incredible thing or she was very good at it, but because it was a way to kind of have contact with the outside world. Over time, she gave up prayer altogether. Now, for those of you who know the end of the story, St. Teresa of Jesus, St. Teresa of Avila, is one of the great mystics of prayer. But for a time, she gave up prayer because she said, I had no imagination, I couldn't meditate on anything, I couldn't get my mind. She said, I would look more forward to getting out of prayer than being in prayer. She said, I would rather have done hard penances than have gone to that time of prayer. It was such a struggle for her. But one of her spiritual directors said, you need to start praying again. This was at the age of 41. So she'd been in the convent now for over 20 years. And her spiritual director said, you need to start praying again. And as he worked with her, ultimately she had some of the greatest mystical experiences because God came and touched her in that powerful way. And I think with all of this, it's a sign to us, God is calling us. And yeah, maybe we have dryness in prayer. Maybe prayer can be a struggle. But we need to keep at it. Keep seeking that intimacy with the Lord, even through the dryness, even through the struggles, even when our brains are saying, I can't figure this out. We're invited into that intimate relationship with God. One of my favorite sayings of St. Teresa is this, and I think it's very appropriate for the time we are in right now. Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. All things are passing. God is unchanging. Patience gains all things. Nothing is lacking for those who have God. God alone is sufficient. And I think as we struggle in the division within our country, as we struggle with COVID and what that means, as we struggle with maybe fear of, the spikes that are coming up with COVID and how is this going to happen and what are we going to do and what does this mean for my family, what does this mean for my life, when it maybe even looking at our own lives and saying, I'm just such a sinner, how will I ever be able to overcome these things? Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. All things are passing. God is unchanging. And just as a note of that, God is unchanging in His love for you. In those moments when you have those highs, in those moments when you feel so close to God, He loves you. And in those moments when you feel despicable, in those moments when you haven't been able to overcome your sin, in those moments when you feel so far from God, His love is no less for you in that moment. God is unchanging. He is unchanging in His love. Patience gains all things. We're so impatient. God, do your will. Now! Patience gains all things. Nothing is lacking to those who have God. Nothing is lacking. Nothing is lacking to those who have God. God alone is sufficient.